So Sargon of Akkad, an intelligence agent, counterintelligence agent. This video he did here just shows what I'm talking about. Let's review. So what's he put out here? This video answers for libertarians. He's got the beautiful Lauren Southern there on the cover for us to capture our attention, of course. Next.
I wanted to address that guy T's Questions for Statists video.
To be clear, the title is Questions Libertarians Have for Statists. Now, I checked out this T guy, and he is just a little kid. He states in his opening vid that he's a libertarian first among other things, but checking through his many vids past 3 years, I see no other mention of the word libertarian, Libertarian Party, or its frontman Ron Paul.
Because I think I can help shed some light on the various questions that he and his libertarian colleagues were asking.
Libertarian colleagues? And here we have obfuscation right from the get-go. I know the title says libertarian, but aside from T-Man's vague admission, who says any of these other questioners are libertarians? I and Sargon know many of these YouTubers, and I don't recall any of them claiming to be specifically libertarians. That's one of my big problems with them, is that they don't get specific with their ideology, just specific on everybody else's.
Before I start though, I just want to explain my position regarding libertarianism. I'm not a libertarian, but of all of the ideological groups on the internet, I find them probably the least objectionable, by a long way. And if I had to suddenly commit to one of these ideological groups, it would probably be libertarianism. So I'm really not doing this to be confrontational, and I'll be reading the comments, of course. And so if libertarians have any questions for my responses, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Hey, statists!
Okay, so statist is definitely the first thing I want to address. There is no such thing as a statist. No one identifies as a statist. So saying, hey, statists, means you're not addressing anyone.
Statism? No such thing? Such an identity as fascist, isn't there? Same thing as statist. That vid title could just as easily have read Questions Libertarians Has for Fascists. Same people. But that is the point of this confusion, isn't it? Redefine all terms topsy-turvy.
I mean, a statist could literally be anyone who isn't a libertarian. The thing is, you're not really targeting anyone with that. You're just targeting non-libertarians at large. I mean, you could be targeting communists, fascists, conservatives, liberals. You could literally just say, hey, non-libertarians, when you say, hey, statists. I find it really bizarre that a movement that is so deeply individualist would collectivize literally everyone else as well. That is just a bizarre thing for me to see. And I don't really know how to answer. I mean, hey, am I statist? I mean, do I think government should exist?
Statism is simply the belief in the need of a government? Again, this is some version of bait-and-switch vagarizing our terms. The question is totalitarian despotic government or non-despotic limited government, as our U.S. founding fathers had planned out for us. Where does Sargon get this idea that libertarianism is absence of government? We'll soon see, won't we?
Well, yes, I think government should exist. Am I in favour of government? Well, not really. To me, government seems to be a necessary evil to enforce the social contract, and I understand that in America it does appear that that has broken down. The government does not seem to be responsive to the people it's meant to be representing, and therefore they're not holding up their side of the bargain, and so I'm not surprised that an anti-government movement would occur. But I'm very firmly in the position that if you want to have a society, it's going to have to be governed, and therefore you are going to require a social contract. Because, and this is something I think a lot of libertarians overlook, is that the social contract isn't just between you and the government. The social contract is also between me and you.
Social contract? You mean the Constitution? Again, where do libertarians claim to be against the Constitution? This is approaching slander.
If a kid couldn't afford lunch because the school bullies kept taking a percentage of his allowance, you wouldn't blame the kid's parents for not giving him enough. So why is it that when people struggle financially, you blame the employer who provides them with money and not the government which is taxing them?
Because the government isn't a bully and the employer isn't the parent of the employees. The employer will pay the employees the minimum amount they can get away with to ensure the maximizing of their own profits, and the government has an obligation to the people that they tax. They aren't simply taking their money for the fun of it so they can spend it as they want, or at least in a regular society. I realize that in the United States there may well be cases, or maybe the rule, that this isn't being upheld, but this is not in a regular, healthy, liberal democracy.
Not upheld? What's not upheld, Sargon? Liberal democracy? Is that what our Constitution says, Sargon?
For fans of democracy, I would ask...
Larkin Rose, an anarchist, not a libertarian.
Is it okay to forcibly rob, control, or otherwise victimize somebody as long as the majority approves of it?
Of course not. This would be something called the tyranny of the majority, and the very reason we have rights is to prevent this.
But just 2 seconds ago you admitted he doesn't have those protective rights. You admitted the government isn't upholding them. Your claim to abstract rights are same as non-existent rights if they are not upheld in the concrete. If government upheld those rights in the concrete to begin with, Larkin would not be deciding now that anarchy is better. Ridiculous.
We all know that every economic system has market failures. Capitalism, socialism, communism, whatever. But my question is, why do you feel morally justified in forcing other people to subsidize these failures? Why should I be forced to subsidize failed electric car companies like Fisker or failed government initiatives like Obamacare? Shouldn't I have the right to decide what risk I want to take with my own money?
Well, once you've been taxed, it's not your money anymore.
Taxed money is not your money anymore is wrong. Goes to the heart of fascist tyrannies. USA is governed for the people, by the people. Sargon, you preach border sovereignty, but that is useless without money sovereignty. Kennedy knew whose money it was, started having the Treasury print dollars without the Fed, and got assassinated for it. You stand with presidential assassins, Sargon.
But I do agree that the government shouldn't be subsidizing private companies. Let them fail on their own, if they are going to fail.
How come you want to ban things that you don't like? As long as they're not hurting other people, what's the big deal?
This is a perfect example of why the word statist is almost worthless. I don't want to ban anything that isn't actively causing harm to people against their will. For example, child pornography, sex trafficking, anything like that. That's fine to ban. And I'm sure libertarians would also agree these things should be banned because, as Julie just said, these things are causing trouble. And if it's not causing trouble, why would you want to ban it? I agree. I totally agree. And I think a government should exist. I suppose by definition I would be a statist. But, like I've just said, I don't want to ban any of these.
Oh, so now statism exists after you said there is no such thing. Now you identify as a statist after you said nobody identifies as a statist. But only after you redefine statism as something benign, like there has never been a negative connotation of totalitarian attached to the term that you should be explaining yourself on.
These things. I think if something is not causing any trouble, then you shouldn't ban it. There's no moral grounds to ban it. There's no justification, so why would you do it? But Julie's talking to me as if I want this sort of thing, which I don't. Her using the term statist has attributed motivations and desires to me that I simply don't hold.
Julie said what to you? Did Julie use the term statist and direct her question at you, Sargon, as the statist? Sargon, you are one of these very same gang of bloggers, not a progressive among them. How is it you were not invited to submit a question? Is it because this whole thing is a setup? The vid title might as well have said Libertarians asking Sargon of Akkad about his statism, since that apparently is what all these questions are designed to be answered by. Except they are not representatives of libertarianism. Your boy T just labeled them libertarian behind their back so to equate libertarianism with anarchism and falsely make your fascism look good by comparison. This video goes on and on with 46 minutes of clever, convoluted misrepresentations of libertarianism by answering anarchists' questions. So let me just jump to Sargon's pièce de résistance of blatant, condescending Nazi arrogance.
If being a democratically elected constitutional republic creates legitimate political authority, does that mean that all the things that were done by the democratically elected constitutional republics of the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and North Korea, all those things were legitimate and justified?
This would take a long time to unpack, so
Oh, you won't unpack that question, will you? You'll go through 46 minutes of unpacking sophomoric questions asked by a guy on toilet showing his junk, but this one you have no time for, huh?
We'll sum it up by saying you're comparing apples to oranges. The United States government is not the same or comparable to a totalitarian, authoritarian state.
What? Do you hear this, Larkin? Did Sargon just tell us to not mind our own business? This Sargon, who has never lived here in USA, is going to tell us US born and bred how and what we should compare and analyze America as. We Americans can't think and shouldn't try. Pay no attention to the Nazis behind the curtain. That can't happen here. Don't even look. The British, with their heads way up their queen's you-know-what, are going to tell us Americans what is. Americanism has been fascism all along, but we silly Americans didn't know our own founding culture. It's never been individual libertarianism. Libertarian was always anarchism and always against the constitutional government, and we Americans just didn't know it. We don't know our own politics and shall have Sargon of Akkad tell us what our politics are, how we shall redefine our political terms, and have Sargon tell us Americans that his Kekistani fascist neo-Nazis aren't the terrorist enemy, but our own children caught up in anti-fascist zeal are the terrorists and enemies. You know, all one needs to do is Google or YouTube libertarian. Ayn Rand, Ron Paul, and Libertarian Party with their doctrine spread out before you would come up by the thousands. But that wouldn't suit your strawman counterintelligence agent Orwellian newspeak Nazi fraud, now would it, Sargon? My son had asked me concerning a certain such and such pundit what I thought of him and his message. So I answered him that in simplifying judging politicians, journalists, and overall media pundits, I draw the line in two places. In the first place, you have 9/11, inside job perpetrated by America's own government, or the lie of Osama bin Laden, Muslim terrorism, yada yada. If the pundit you are listening to, as is his worldview that 9/11 was Muslim terrorism, then you are listening to a deceiver and liar. Evader of facts that will not support his preconceived, paid-for message. A person of zero integrity sold his soul for a 99-cent burger. The second line I draw has to do with the Sandy Hook incident. To remind, a young man entered a charter school, it has been reported, went straight to a certain classroom and opened fire, killing a teacher and many children, before re-entering the hall and killing others before killing himself. Specifically, the part where the wrong man, Ryan Lanza, was named as the dead shooter. Within minutes of the report, the actual Ryan Lanza, alive, 2 states over from the scene of the reported crime, was online Facebook stating the obvious and blowing the whole media cover story out of the water. In 15 minutes, his Facebook was shut down. In 2 hours, Ryan Lanza was GPS located, arrested, kidnapped, and has not been seen or heard from since. Kidnapping, like first-degree murder, is a capital offense. That our government under constitutional law did it in our face is treason, crimes against humanity. And if these aren't Nazi takeover, dismissal of all human rights, I don't know what is. So that is where I draw the line, my son. All those politicians and media pundits like Sargon, who falsely accuse Muslims and feign ignorance and amnesia over Ryan Lanza, far as I'm concerned, should be given a Nuremberg-like trial, then placed in front of a firing squad and shot. The getaway car driver is also the bank robber. These people are driving the getaway car for mass murderers and traitors. Goebbels was just a propagandist, and he was hanged for it. Deservedly so, as with these others if they don't turn.